Hey guys, so I'm getting ready to install a cold air intake system on my G35, and I thought this would be a great time to talk about an intake, what it does, what's the difference from stock, how does it improve horsepower, how does it improve airflow. Let's begin. Your intake system, which was removed right here, this system is designed to specifically suck in oxygen so that it can mix with the air fuel mixture and get combustion. The more oxygen you can get into your system, the more efficient your engine runs every stroke of the piston. Okay, let's go back to the box. Okay, most factory air systems, you're going to see some kind of air box that has a filter in it. We'll pull that out in a second. Usually right behind the air filter is a mass airflow sensor. This is what senses the temperature of the intake temperature, and this also senses how much air is entering the system, and this kind of tells the car how much fuel to dump and not dump. This right here is the piping that makes its way to the throttle body, and this here is another silencer for the car. So a stock intake system is designed to, is specifically really optimized for low RPM driving. The stock intake system draws air from a safe high location so that it doesn't hydro lock. We'll talk about that when we get to cold air intakes. And as you can see here, stock intakes are also designed to be quiet. You know, in the car world, you think loud is better, but for daily use driving, people want their cars to be quiet. So intake systems have these baffles, these ripples here. This disrupts airflow. They have these silencer chambers here to quiet airflow. Another silencer chamber up here. They have these intake pipes, and there's another silencer here to quiet to quiet down the intake, the induction noise. And now let's pop open the air filter and let's look at this as well. So I removed, and if you can look in there, look at all that baffling. All this stuff quiets induction noise, and it can hurt high end RPM. And if we look here, if I can get it out, this is our factory air filter. Okay, usually most cars from factory come with paper air filters, and these are disposable. A lot of people change them every year or two. All right, these are usually paper. Sometimes these even have a foam over top of them. We'll talk about that when we get to our new intake. So now that we see how this stock intake is designed, let's look at our new code. Let's look at our new cold air intake and talk about what separates it from this. Okay, and I will be installing a Stillen cold air intake on my G35. Okay, let's talk about what is the difference from this versus that. To give you an example, well, to start, this is a short ram air intake design. Okay, we'll talk about what separates the short ram air intakes from the cold air intakes, the true cold air intakes. But to begin, let's start with the filter. So one of the first things we want to compare is that this is a paper filter. Okay, as paper filters get old, as they age, as they, as they're doing their filter design, the dirt and things that hit this paper, it'll cause blockages, and you lose airflow where you get dirt at. And okay, also notice how restrictive this is. All right, some of these paper intakes even have a foam over top of them for even more filtration, which is great for the engine, but it really hurts high-end horsepower. Remember, the objective of the intake is to get as much air into the engine as possible without letting as much dirt get in. So let's compare to our filter here. Now, this filter is a K&N filter. It is a cotton filter. This is a oiled filter. All right, these are designed for as much airflow as possible. Cotton breathes better than paper does. These can get almost up to 50% more airflow than a stock paper filter. Not only that, it's hard to show, but you have more surface area. If you was to fold this, kind of wrap this around the intake, you probably can only get half as much surface area as this cone style filter does. So that's another reason why you usually see these cone style filters on a cold air intake. They get more airflow. Not only that, these are oiled filters, okay? What you do is, as you drive, as you start to filter, remember what I said with paper filters, when you get dirt and things, they cause blockages. Not with these cotton filters. They kind of, the oil will hold the dirt, and it will there's like layers of this stuff, and they'll still keep allowing air to pass through. These have very long service lives, and these are cleanable and reusable. If you are concerned, there are usually 3 types of filter design with these. You have the oiled filter. These give the best airflow possible, while they don't filter as they still filter extremely well. You can do your research, but they don't filter as well as the dry variant. And you can get a dry filter. Remember, this is oiled. A lot of people, if you're a person that gets super scared, supposedly the oil in here can bleed a little bit and make its way onto the mass airflow sensor and cause it to have issues. I will tell you this: I have 6 Canon air filters on 6 different vehicles for over 200,000 miles. Did not have any issues. I think they even have a video of completely dipping this in oil, putting it in the engine, and not getting a check engine light. Just something to talk about. But you can get a dry variant of this. It's just a dry filter. Usually it looks silver or gray. And if you want to go even further than that, they usually sell like a bag that you can literally put right over top of the filter for optimal filtering. It's up to you how you want to go with that. But I'm fine with this style. Based on where you live and how you use your vehicle, consider what kind of high flow air filter you want to use. Let's keep going. If you look at this air box here, notice it has baffles, it has chambers. This is another silencer. There's this back piece to it. All these things restrict airflow and silence the air induction noise as much as possible, okay? Versus when we look here, this is a heat shield. It keeps hot air from entering the intake. I'll show you that when we get to the car. But notice that it's super open when it's away from the engine bay. So the hot air, the engine itself sits on this side of the motor, where the open air sits open here. So all this open space is where we can get more airflow, and it is non-restrictive for the intake system. Let's keep going. Next up, we're going to talk about how the air comes in. This actually has a small little trumpet design in here, but naturally speaking, these don't have something which you see here is called a velocity stack. Like a trumpet, what this does is this allows for maximum airflow. It's super smooth. This smooths out and gives you as maximum amount of air you can get possible. Also, it causes something called a Venturi effect. As you're sucking in this airflow, it hits this as it gets smaller. The Venturi effect basically causes this high pressure air to reach the throttle body even faster. Causes the air to reach the throttle body even faster. This is actually important, especially as, like I say, as we get into that high RPMs, we need as much airflow as possible. This is another design that is really important that is slept on, but this makes a big difference when it comes to the intake system. Next up, let's look at our intake piping itself. As you can see here, remember, we have these baffling couplers. These hurt airflow. This makes it quiet. We have a silencer chamber here to also hurt airflow. And keep things quiet. And we have this like boxy style up top. I think this also is like a deflector of some sort to hurt airflow as well. Okay, let's compare this to this. Notice how rugged design this is. I think this is called roto-molded. It's super smooth in here. There is no restrictions at all. This is designed to have maximum airflow come right to the throttle body, and this is what helps give us our louder induction noise. We don't have any of these silencers anymore. Also, our coupler designs. As you see here, this is baffled. This hurts airflow. This is a straight through design. If you're ever curious about what this hump is for, this hump helps you bend the intake as you're installing it. But this allows super clean airflow, whereas this causes baffling. Okay, so the main things we need to understand that the aftermarket intake does better than the stock air intake is that we get get higher airflow. We have more surface area to receive better airflow. We have a Venturi or velocity stack / Venturi ring to increase how much airflow we can get, how fast we can get air into the system. We have non-baffling couplers. We have non-restrictive piping that helps go straight to the throttle body. And lastly, we have something called a heat shield, where this keeps the hot air away from the air filter, while also still allowing any area where cool air can hit the air filter is designed. These are all the things that a intake system does that makes it better than a stock air intake system. All right. Now we got to talk about a short ram air intake versus a cold air intake. Okay. So let's talk about a short ram air intake and a cold air intake. Most engine bays nowadays just don't have any engine bay space for a true cold air intake system, but typically speaking, what separates a cold air intake system from a short ram air intake system is that the cold air intake usually sits somewhere down here for optimum airflow. It keeps the air filter away from the engine so that the engine heat does not increase our air intake temperatures. Hotter air is less dense than colder air. Your engine wants oxygen. The more oxygen it gets, the higher performing it will run. So by putting the cold air intake system down here, you could get higher, you can get cooler airflow, better performance, higher horsepower gains. However, not every car can do this, and I'll explain, because it doesn't really work for this car. So what's cool about this car is you have three variants. You have the 350Z, you have the coupe, and you have the sedan. The coupe itself, let's go down to the bumper. One thing you will notice about a G35 coupe is they usually have like a mesh grille right here, and if you're looking down here in this corner area, there's a slot that you can pull up, and this allows cold air to enter the system. The G35 sedan doesn't have this, but the reason why I took that silencer out is if you can look in here and you look up there, see how we still have a pathway as the car runs? We can still get cold air from that area. That's why I took that silencer out, to help our air intake get as much airflow as possible. And as far as the sedan is concerned, most short ram air intake systems will usually go about the same location as where your stock air box is. Like I said, obviously with the free-flowing air system, the velocity stacks, the non-restrictive piping, this is what separates the the short air intake from a cold air intake. Typically speaking, some people still will call a short ram air intake a cold air intake because it has a heat shield on it. So, but because the short ram air intake goes exactly where the stock location is, a lot of people just think you don't get any horsepower gains, just put a drop-in filter. The thing I wanted to mention for the cold air intake systems, like a G37 for instance, there are cutouts. I think there were cutouts in this area because it had dual intakes, so it would suck air from the grill as well. Some people, you can even put your cold air intake systems in front of the radiator and AC condenser, like in the grill area. So cold air intakes can go a lot of places. Like I said, usually it's just somewhere that's located away from the engine bay. So the thing how this heat shield works is, notice that it blocks off, there's another piece of the intake that goes here, but notice that the shield blocks off the heat from the engine, and so that we don't suck in hot air. But I'm gonna throw something out here for you guys that might be a little bit weird. A lot of people aren't gonna believe me, but I still talk about it anyway. When I first had this car years and years ago, I didn't know anything about the Jim Wolf pop chargers or anything like that. I just went for K&N. K&N specifically made its intake for the coupe. A lot of parts were made for the coupe back then. Sedan did not used to get a lot of love. If you had a sedan, you just had to have the short ram air intake system with no heat shield at all, and the air filter would sit out like this. I think I had this air intake system in like that for like 2 years, and literally using the mass airflow sensor while driving, you'd be shocked to know that I was not sucking in any hot air with the open air element. Let's say it was like 40 degrees outside, my air intake temperature was like 50. The only big thing I noticed was when I was sitting at idle, usually anything over a minute, my air intake temperatures would skyrocket though. They would go from like 40, like I said, about 50 degrees all the way up to about 100. So it's a little thing for you guys who, They get pissed off when they see someone with the intake system that doesn't have a heat shield on it. When you're in motion, believe it or not, you probably aren't getting as much hot air as you think, or any at all, because there's so much airflow coming into the engine. Versus only difference is when you're sitting still, that's when you're gonna have a big problem. Just remember that this will be louder. If you're a person who does not like noise, this will be louder than that. And also, if you have a cold air intake system where the filter sits lower in the bumper, just understand if you're in an area that floods or anything like that, you can have a chance of hydrolocking the engine. I've never seen it happen, but your air filter sits lower. It sits usually down near the fender liner. So just make sure that you don't drive if you have a true cold air intake system, don't drive it in like flooding rain or anything like that. You could have problems. Also, if you haven't checked my dyno video, I advise you do. With my stock air intake system, my engine stopped giving me power, or the intake could not provide enough power beyond 54 or 5500 RPM. So that just goes to show you that there is a restriction between this and this. Now that I have the cold air intake system in, I don't mind giving you guys some live data. I have some live data of me driving the car with the stock intake. I'll do some live data with the new intake and see if we have our intake temperatures, and we'll look at our how much airflow we're getting. But now that I have all that information in, I'm gonna throw this intake in my car. So thanks for watching, you guys. Till next time, I hope. Bye.